Hey everyone, welcome to Learn, Earn, Grow with PG, the place where we simplify tech, supercharge skills, and level up your DevOps journey. I'm PG, your friendly DevOps engineer. Let's jump into today's topic. So guys, in today's session, we'll set up and configure kind in our EC2 instance. So for this particular demo, I have chosen Ubuntu 24.04 of type T2 medium. You can pick any VM of your choice from any of the cloud platforms like AWS or Azure or GCP. So before we get into the real hands-on, let's see what this kind actually means and when and where this can be used. So kind is an acronym of Kubernetes and Docker. So this is a utility tool developed by Kubernetes community to run Kubernetes cluster using Docker container as a node missions, which means like every container will behave as a separate VM or a node machine. So instead of you having an standalone server with a higher configuration, you can use a single EC2 instance where Docker gets installed. On top of that, we'll install few more components. So that behaves as a kind. So you can create multiple clusters with multiple node machines, right? So this is how it is going to work. And let's see why it is being preferred when compared to the conventional or a traditional Kubernetes cluster for local testing or for any kind of demo. This is lightweight. Why? Because we are not going to install any unwanted packages into the EC2 instance to make it a bit heavier. So the resource utilization of this kind is very low when compared to other traditional Kubernetes clusters. And it runs on Docker. It doesn't need multiple VMs to get connected. As I said, every container is going to behave as a separate VM. So consider you want to create a cluster with a single master and two slave machines. So what we generally do, we'll pick one EC2 instance for master and other two EC2 instance for slave machines, right? So let me picturize here. So this is traditional Kubernetes cluster. If I want to have a cluster, what I need, a master. For a master, I need to choose an EC2 machine, and this need to be connected with slave 1 and slave 2. So all these things put together my traditional Kubernetes cluster, right? So this is going to be my cluster. So this has a separate hardware component. It could be of T2 medium, and I need to choose T2 micro for slave machines. So what actually happens here is it makes the cluster a bit heavier, and also you need to pay an extra cost for all these three VMs separately, right? Even if one VM is not being in use within the cluster, like you need to pay for the resource utilization of that particular cluster. So in order to avoid all these things, especially for testing or learning or any kind of an POC that you want to do, or to replicate your testing in a similar environment that of your dev, QA or UAT, you can simply spin up an EC2 machine of your type and install Docker, and on top of that we need a few more components. So just by a flip of a second, you'll be able to spin up your kind cluster. So within that cluster, even you can have a single node and a single master cluster, or single master with multiple node machines. So I'll just show you in the demo. So coming back to the point here, so it uses a very low resource utilization. So here I have chosen T2 medium, right? So my CPU is one virtual core CPU, and the memory or the RAM for this particular type is I guess 2 GB of RAM, I guess, and this is also like not two virtual core CPU, right? Okay, so it runs on Docker. I don't need any kind of an extra VMs, how we have used here for this traditional Kubernetes cluster. And since we are using only Docker and container as a node or a slave machine for all my tasks, the startup is going to be very fast. So it won't take much time to boot. And you'll be able to create multiple clusters in a single VM. See, this is going to be my single VM, standalone VM for this particular kind, right? So within this T2 medium, I'll be able to create multiple kind clusters with a single master and a node, or single master and a multiple node. I'll show you that. So this is what. So you'll be able to create multiple clusters and with multiple node machines in a single VM based on the resource utilization. It doesn't mean that you'll be able to create as many as clusters within a VM. It is based on the resource utilization that is being allocated for this VM. Consider here I have chosen T2 medium, right? So this has 2 virtual core CPU and 2 GB byte of RAM. So I'll be able to, I mean, for example, I'm just telling, so I'll be able to create almost like 2 to 3 clusters. If I try to create a 4th cluster, again, it will take too much of time to start up because we have already reached the threshold level of resource utilization for these 3 clusters. Say for example, this cluster it utilizes 0.5 microcore CPU, and cluster 2 utilizes 1 virtual core CPU, and cluster 3 again it uses 0.5 CPU. So what happens when I try to spin up the 4th cluster, right? So I don't have enough resource from the underlying hardware. So this is T2 medium is my underlying VM, right? So it does not have any kind of an extra resource to provide for the 4th cluster. So you should make sure that what kind of machine and what kind of resource you are providing to this kind. But by default, you will be able to create multiple cluster provided what is the underlying hardware resource, right? So where it can be used for your local testing, consider you are doing some POC and you want to experience the what to say, like to see the performance of your application in a cluster. So you cannot test this directly in your lower environment, obviously not in the higher environment too. So in that case, just get a VM and spin up your kind cluster and directly spin up your application. You can see all the performance and also how the application behaves in the cluster. And once this testing goes fine, you can replicate or deploy the same application in your real-time clusters. It could be dev, QA or UAT. And this is mainly used for CI/CD pipeline purpose and also for learning and demo purpose. Okay, so why do you want to waste resources for your learning by creating multiple master and slave machines? It is not required, right? So these are all the basic things that you want to understand before picking kind. And now let's jump into the hands-on. So for this testing, I'll choose Ubuntu 24.04. I'll give name to this VM as kind Ubuntu 24.04. During my testing, I tried with T2 Micro. I was able to create a single cluster, but when I ran my first pod, NGINX pod, it hung completely. I'm not able to move forward. So what I do is, instead of micro, I'll pick T2 medium, okay, with 2 virtual core CPU and 4 GB of RAM. Sorry, so it has 4 GB of RAM, and I have my ready-made PEM key available, and I'll pick the existing security group, and I'll use the complete free tier volume 30 GB. So let me spin up my machine. Okay, by the time the machine gets ready, let's go back here. So what all the components that I need to install in my VM is very simple. First, install Docker, because the whole kind concept is based on Docker. So Docker need to be installed, and download the kind package followed by install kubectl. Why? Because we need to communicate with the Kubernetes, right? So when you install kind package, it brings the lightweight Kubernetes into the VM. So whatever pod definition file or deployment or any kind of Kubernetes related like testing, you need kubectl to be installed, right? So these are all the 3 components. It is very simple. So now I'll go back to my VM. I'll connect. Let me pick the public IP. Where is my public IP? Okay, I'm using Mobextrum to connect to my VM. You can use anything of your choice, putty or git bash or even visual code studio. Yes, it's done. It should be connected. Still it is getting initialized. Okay, done. Now it should be connected. Yes, okay, it got connected. So this is my bare VM. I'll increase my font size. Okay, so since this is my fresh VM, I need to update and upgrade my VM first. So let me switch to root user. I'll update my VM. It takes 10 to 15 seconds. So this is especially for the beginners, those who have started preparing for Kubernetes. Don't go for the fully blown Kubernetes cluster. Even though if you're using a free tier AWS account. Yes, it's almost done. Okay, so it's done. So I need to install Docker. So since this is my Ubuntu machine, I'm using apt as a packet manager. Okay, Docker is installed, and I'll just start the Docker, and I'll enable the Docker to make sure that on every boot the Docker will be in a starting state, so that I need not manually go and start the Docker daemon every time when I spin up the machine. And if you wanna see here, I'm as a root user, but in real time, in organization level, I mean, you won't be getting an root privilege. So separate user will be created for you, and that is the user every time you'll be logging into the machine. So in that case, you can run this command so that adds the current user, like Ubuntu is the current user, right? So you can use Ubuntu as a current user to perform all the Docker commands. So every time you need not give sudo as a prefix. Okay, so now I'm trying to download kind package, and that's it. Within 5 seconds it's got downloaded. I'll give execute permission. So see here, it got downloaded, but it is not with execute permission. If you look here, it has only read only permission. So I'll just give an execute permission, followed by I'll move this package to the specific location, that is user local bin kind from my current location. See, now I don't have this kind package anymore in my current location. And then now it's time to download the kubectl package. Okay, it got failed. I know why it is happening. Even during testing I had the same issue. Okay, so what I'll do, I need to check okay, let me try to run this specific command. No, it's same. Okay, what I'll do, I'll just get the latest version. Yeah, so it is 1.32.3 is the latest version of kind. Okay, let me download this. So what I'll do, I'll just replace this with 1.32. Yes, now it's working, and I need to give execute permission to this kubectl. See, if you look here, it has only read access. So now I got execute permission, and if you prefer moving it to the specific location, yes, you can do that. I'm moving it to user local bin folder, and now it's almost done, right? So we have installed Docker and kubectl, and that's it. So now we are good to go to create our first cluster. So let me create my first cluster. Okay, so before that, let's see how my so I need to interact with kind, not directly with the Kubernetes here. So to create a cluster, I need to talk to kind. So the command is kind create cluster. So this particular command will spin up a Kubernetes cluster using Docker container as a node machine. And once this is done, you'll be able to see the status. Control plane. This is a plain command. So what it does is it will create a single node, single master machine cluster. So if I say, see, get nodes, I'll clear the screen and show you that. Look here, kind control plane. It has chosen the random name kind control plane, and it is the control plane, which means like master. So this particular cluster behaves as a master and also as a slave. So single node, single master cluster. Okay, we need to give some more time for it to be ready. See, now my cluster is ready. I can spin up, like create any pods or a deployment or services within this cluster. And if I want to list the clusters that are available here, what I can do, kind list clusters. Sorry, what is the command? Kind get, I guess, not list. Kind get clusters. See, this is the cluster that we created now, kind. Okay, and if I want to delete, I can simply give delete cluster. Since I have only one cluster, it deletes that one cluster. So how do I create a cluster with a specific name? Yes, even that is possible. You need to add an extra flag, and that's it. And here what I'll do, now we created a cluster with a single master and I mean like the cluster itself behaves as a single master and a single node. So now I'll try to create this with an YAML file. So dev cluster dot YAML, and here let me give this. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a cluster. So kind should be cluster, API version, and node mission. So how many nodes do I need? 3. One is going to act as a master, and 2 missions are going to work as a worker mission or a slave mission or a node mission, whatever. So what I'll do, just to bring it fast, because if I put 2 worker missions to spin up and bring this cluster up, it is taking too much of time. So I'll take 1 master and a 1 slave mission. Okay, so 2 missions here. So I have a YAML file, right? So I'll tell to kind to create a cluster and give name as dev, out of which file this config file, that is dev. So this is a declarative way to create your cluster just by a single command, and you can define as many as node missions you can. Earlier when we tried to create the default cluster, it took almost like 30 seconds, right? So now for this particular cluster, it will take some extra seconds. Why? Because it need to configure both master and the slave missions. Okay, so my kind cluster is ready. So if I wanna see the cluster, get clusters, see dev. So this is the name I have given to my cluster, and let's create our first pod. And before that, let's try to pull any default pod available here. Kubectl get pod. I don't have any default pod running in my default namespace, and I have the system related pods. So these are the core level pods that are running in kube system namespace, core DNS, etcd, for storing all your informations in the form of a key value pair. This is just a database, and all kube proxy, kube scheduler. So these are all the components. All master and node mission components are working together. Almost 10 pods are running here. Okay, so let's not touch this. And now it's time for us to create our custom pod in default namespace. Okay, so I need to check kubectl get nodes. See here it says the the name is dev cluster, and it has one control plane and one worker node. So they both are in ready state. So this is their version and all other stuffs. So now let me create my first pod. I'll use this particular. So my pod dot YAML is very simple, right? So I'm creating an NGINX pod with NGINX image. So the name of the container is going to be NGINX. So just to make it a bit clear, let me give the container name is C1 and pod name is PG NGINX, right? Okay, so again simple. So all these things you need to interact with kubectl. Okay, kubectl apply -f and my pod file. So pod got created. So kubectl get pods. Yes, PG NGINX is the pod name, and within the pod I'm going to create only one container with NGINX image. So it's in pending state, it's still getting created. Okay, now it is ready. Let's describe kubectl, describe pod and a pod name. And if you look here, you have all the metadata, name of the pod and where it got created, default, and the main thing we want to see is and in which machine it got created. We have one master and one slave, right? So this pod got created in the dev cluster and in the slave machine. So master will never take any workload, and the prime duty of the master machine is always to allocate work to the node machines or the worker machines. So since I have only one worker machine, so this pod got created in the worker machines. And you can try with multiple node machines and try to create an deployment object and how it behaves and which node machine is picking the pod. If one node machine is already allocated with enough resource or a pod, and how the other node machines are behaving, all these things you can check it here. Okay, and after completing all your POC, what you can do, just delete the pod, sorry, delete the cluster, kind delete cluster, and a cluster name you should give. Okay, okay, delete cluster. Yes, it got deleted, and I don't have any cluster anymore running in my EC2 instance. So if I want to check, kind get clusters, still it is showing. Oh, it's deleting the cluster kind, which is already not there. This is the default cluster, right? So I need to what is the extra flag, kind delete cluster hyphen name followed by the cluster name dev. Yes, see, it says it is deleting the master control plane and also the worker along with this. So now if I check for get cluster, no clusters are available in this EC2 instance. And I want to check for the resource utilization that we missed, right? Let's try to do that. I'm not sure, will that work? So kind actually does not come along with the monitoring tools pre-install, that we need to install it separately. Maybe, see, this is the command we'll be using it in Kubernetes, right? So here it is not possible. Why? Because kind is a lightweight component, so all those additional extra features won't be available. If it is required, you can install a package to monitor your cluster, and you'll be able to execute this particular command. So if any cluster is running, see, let's try to do that. It will throw you an error. I'll create cluster, see, with the same dev cluster.yaml. Yes, it's done. Cluster is ready. See, my cluster is dev cluster is ready. Let's try to check. See, it is not able to collect the matrices from the node machine. So you need to download and install a specific package for this to monitor. Then you will be able to see how much resource being utilized by this particular cluster. Okay, fine guys, and that's it. So the whole document, I have added it in my GitLab repository. You can use that readme.md file to execute in your local machine. Thank you guys.